How exactly is the Netherworld? The place is dark in the Bible. Job chapter 17, verse 13. If my only hope is dwelling in Sheol and spreading my couch in darkness, and the text continues. In the Netherworld, silence pervades. Psalm chapter 31, verse 18b. Put the wicked to shame, reduce them to silence in Sheol. Those who dwelt in the Netherworld were called rЄpā'îm, shades. Isaiah 14, verse 9. Below, Sheol is all astir, preparing for your coming, awakening the rЄpā'îm to greet you. All the leaders of the earth, making all the kings of the nations rise from their thrones. In Greek thought, the word shades describes ghosts or spirits, but in Israel, biblical Israel, the word describes beings who are but a shadow of their former selves. Doppelgangers, parts of a person, a shadow, a reflection. In other words, they no longer have the fullness of being experienced in life on earth. Psalm chapter 6, verse 5. For in death there is no remembrance of you. Who praises you in Sheol? Most are even unable to remember God, an unimaginable and unbearable experience for an Israelite. Though the characteristics of existence in Sheol are peculiar to Israel, the basic concept as the dwelling place of the dead remains similar, quite similar to the shamanic concept we've already talked about. The roots of the tree. In the period of Second Temple Judaism, however, Second Temple Judaism, 520 BCE to 70 Common Era, the understanding of Sheol underwent some evolution, some development. At one point in Israel's history, Sheol was considered to be a place that was final and permanent. Isaiah chapter 38, verse 10. This is about 700 years before Christ. In the noontime of life, I said, I must depart. To the gates of Sheol I have been consigned for the rest of my years. In other words, there is no end to Sheol. Dusty, dark, dreary existence. Not punishment. Just that is the way of things. That's where they go to. Yet even though initially it was considered the final and permanent place for the dead, in a shadowy or hollow existence, at some period later in Israel's history, Sheol began to be conceived of as an intermediate place, to be followed at some point by reward in the sky vault, or punishment in the abyss of all things. And later, following the conquest of Alexander the Great, which spread Hellenic thought, Macedonian thoughts and practices throughout the world, the Hellenistic concept of the immortality of the soul began to influence Israelite thinking about existence after death. Wisdom chapter 9, verse 15. For the corruptible body burdens the soul, and the earthly tent weighs down the mind with its many concerns. Here is an anthropology. Though it's an Israelite work, in Alexandria this was written, about 50 years before Christ. Wisdom, the book of wisdom, or wisdom of Solomon, Ecclesiasticus, is a book which has a lot of Hellenic thought in it. A lot of Hellenic philosophical thought and speculation about what exactly human existence is that is really at variance with the vast majority of anthropological pictures you get in the Old and New Testament. Mostly, the human being is seen as a person, a body, an animated body in a series of body zones of relationships. Eyes, heart, ears, mouth, hands, feet. But in wisdom, you're getting a a Hellenic idea, that the human being is like a incarnated soul. Wisdom chapter 15, verse 8. With misspent toil, he molds a meaningless God from the selfsame clay, though he himself shortly before was made from the earth. Okay, that's Israelite. That goes back to Adam, right? Adam. And is soon to go whence he was taken, when the life that was lent him is demanded back. So certainly, as the Israelites got conquered again and again and again, they got more or less enculturated into different ways of thinking about human existence.
Is one of the reasons that wisdom made it into the canon is because of the age of the book? And because...
Well, it was attributed to Solomon, so at one point they thought it actually went back to Solomon, which would be about, before 922 BCE. But now we know that it's an intertestamental work in the 50s. It's written in Greek. The copies we have of it are in Greek, probably originating in Alexandria. It is trying to synthesize Greco-Roman philosophical thought with contemporary Israelite thought. So it's an interesting work. It's an interesting work.
And it's been omitted from the Protestant Bible.
Yes.
For any specific reason?
The main reason that Luther couldn't find a reason and others couldn't find any testimony of this book existing in contemporary Jewish canons. Jewish works lacked those books. So he thought, Dr. Luther, Jews are the same today as they always have been, right? Because I have this view of everything being static. History is static. So the oldest Jewish sources testify that the Book of Wisdom isn't there. So that means the Book of Wisdom doesn't belong. You can respect Luther to a degree. He's trying to go back to the sources. And the canon wasn't completely settled in Luther's day. It takes somebody to challenge something before the church's shepherding authority comes out and says, well, okay, I'm perceiving a thread of unity of all believers. Now we better rule on this, okay? Choose which theology is the one that best represents what we always have believed and always have taught. Well, it turns out, actually, many centuries later, that there was no canon there in the first century at all. In fact, probably Marcion of Sinope is the first person to ever come up with a canon of any group of Israelites or proto-Christians or whatever you have. And that's not to the second century. He's actually the person that starts, let's canonize this certain set of books. So there were different translations that were in flux in different places. You had Israelites that spoke Greek and lived as emigres among non-Israelite majorities, and they preferred Greek translations. Certainly the New Testament authors preferred those Greek translations because when they quote from the Old Testament into their New Testament works, guess which version they're using? The Greek version, the Septuagint. But we know there were Palestinian translations and there were Aramaic translations, the Targumim, which have the commentaries interjected, right into the text, interpolated right into the text. And there's variants all over the place. So this was all at flux, and it wasn't as nice and neat as Luther and his Catholic opponents imagined it in that time that he lived. So
this particular book had a strong influence on how we developed our theology of hell.
This book had I would say this book demonstrates that there was an evolution. It's a mile marker on the evolution of one of the different branches of the way Israelites, right before the time of Jesus, were speculating in the Near East and Middle East about what it means to be human and what happens when you die.
Okay.
Some Israelites in this time period began to believe that the souls of the righteous went immediately to God at death and would receive new bodies at the resurrection, while the wicked remained in Sheol. Daniel chapter 12, verses 2 to 3, which, though it's attributed to a figure who lived hundreds of years before Christ in the Babylonian captivity, actually was written as resistance literature and Israelite sky lore about 150 Common Era, 165 Common Era, in the times of Antiochus IV Epiphanes coming in to attack Israel. So it's a way for Israelites, a text for Israelites to say, no, we need to stay Israelite. We need to keep our customs. In the time of the Maccabees, this was written. Anyway, Daniel chapter 12, verses 2 to 3. Many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, others to reproach and everlasting disgrace, honor, shame. But those with insight shall shine brightly, like the splendor of the firmament. That's the sky vault, the material of the sky vault. And those who lead the many to justice shall be like the stars forever. So that's the understanding of resurrection in Daniel. You become a star. God glorifies you. That's honor, shame. He makes you shine like the sun. Josephus, who's writing just after the time of Jesus in his Judean War, puts it this way. Do you not know that those who depart out of this life, according to the law of nature, and pay the debt which was received from God when he that lent it to us as patron. See, this is Roman patronage. A patron lends you something, and the patron determines when and how and if you pay it back as his client. Well, if God has given us our breath and our thoughts and our life, God can request it back anytime he wants. It's part of the payment. Okay, that's all it's saying. And pay the debt which was received from God when he that lent it to us, patronage, is pleased to require it back, patronage. Enjoy eternal fame, that their houses and their generations are sure, that their souls are pure and obedient, obtaining a most holy place in sky vault, from whence in the revolution of ages they are again sent into pure bodies, bodies of light, while the souls of those whose hands have acted madly against themselves are received by the darkest places in Hades. And while God, who is their Father, punishes those that offend against either of them in their posterity, for which reason God hates such doings, and the crime is punished by our most wise legislator. In the Greek Bible, Sheol is usually translated as Hades, but it doesn't relate to the god Hades of Greek mythology. In the New Testament period and a little earlier, Sheol, Hades, came to be understood as a place of punishment for sin. Matthew chapter 11, verse 23. And as for you, Capernaum, will you be exalted to sky vault? Will you be made into a star or a constellation? You and the villagers? No, you're going to go down into Hades. For if the mighty deeds done in your midst had been done in Sodom, it would have remained until this day. You know, we also have the story in Luke of Lazarus and the greedy man, which we have a whole set of videos on in our parables, Jesus and the parables of Jesus playlist, and that talk about this afterlife of everlasting disgrace or everlasting glory. The case of Lazarus, raised up to the bosom of Abraham, made into a constellation in the top of sky vault. At the bottom of sky vault, the very bottom underneath the earth, at that time seen as a sphere, in a bottomless bowl or abyss, that would be where the greedy man goes. Hey, thanks for watching. Just continue the playlist for the next part of the study. If you have further questions, this is good. They will get addressed, so keep watching. If you found value, please subscribe, like, and share. As always, questions, comments, and criticisms are most welcome. God bless you.